Before you start uploading a video to YouTube, it's important to optimize that video to make sure it's the highest quality video possible. And in this video, I'm going to give you some techniques and strategies that you can use to optimize your videos before actually uploading them to YouTube. One of the first tips that I have is to use a video editing program. YouTube has some great video editing features built in, but they don't quite have the number of features that a third-party program is going to have. So there are a number of programs you can use, but here's a short list of some of the ones I recommend. You could use iMovie, Adobe Premiere, Final Cut Pro, Windows Movie Maker, Camtasia, or ScreenFlow. If you're just starting out, I'd recommend using either iMovie or Windows Movie Maker. iMovie is going to be if you're using a Mac computer, and Windows Movie Maker is going to be if you're using Windows. If you're doing screen recording, I would recommend using either Camtasia or ScreenFlow. Camtasia would be for Windows and ScreenFlow would be for Mac. When you get into the advanced video editing, you might want to move up to the Final Cut Pro or the Adobe Premiere. But this is just a short list, and you can do your own research to see some other options as well. One of the first things you want to think about is editing out any mistakes that you have in your videos. If you're speaking to the camera, you want to avoid using the ums and so's as much as possible, and when you go to edit your video, maybe you can take some of those out. You don't want to overdo it because you want your video to sound natural. But if you think it's going to be distracting to the viewer, it's a good idea to edit out all of those small interjectory words. It's also important to edit out any long pauses. Earlier in the course, I talked about being efficient in your videos and getting to the point as soon as possible. If you have 15 seconds of dead silence in your video, go ahead and just edit it out. It'll get to that point quicker and the user will like it better. You also might want to think about taking multiple shots when you shoot your videos. So even if you're comfortable with the first shot you take, but you have some reservations about certain parts of the video, you might want to go ahead and take a second shot, see how it goes, and maybe you can even edit the two together. So it's definitely something you want to think about when you're shooting videos to be uploaded to YouTube. And then if you're going to be speaking to the camera, you might want to try videos that are scripted where you have everything that you need to say right in front of you, and then videos that are unscripted where you're just flowing using bullet points or some short notes. And then you can see what works best for you. Different people work differently. Some people are going to like to have all of their movies scripted, and some people would rather have them unscripted. When you're editing your videos before uploading, it's important to take a look at your sound levels. You want to make sure that your sound levels are consistent, so you don't want your video to be really loud in the beginning and then very quiet at the end. And as a whole, you don't want your video to be too loud or too quiet. So make sure that in that video editing program you're using that you're listening to your audio before you upload it to YouTube. It's a good idea to add a branded intro and or outro to your video before you upload it to YouTube as well. So at the very beginning of your video, maybe the first 3 seconds, you can have your logo slide in there so everybody sees the brand, it gets embedded in their mind, and then they watch the video, and then the very last 3 seconds you might have your logo come in again, just so you get some of that brand recognition. If you're using YouTube for marketing, then you definitely want to do that. And if you're using it for monetization, it's a good idea as well because it can get people to remember your brand, your organization, and keep them coming back again and again. When you're optimizing your videos and just creating your videos in general, it's important to think about the viewer. So get to the point. I talked about editing out those long pauses, the ums and the so's. The sooner you get to the point, the happier the viewer is going to be. So making sure that your video is short and sweet is always good. And then it's important to not make any assumptions about what the viewer knows or doesn't know. For instance, you don't want to say, since none of you know about the best export settings for YouTube, here's a list of what YouTube recommends, because you might have some viewers that do know the best export settings for YouTube. So instead, you could rephrase it and say, I know some of you might know what the best export settings are for YouTube videos, but in case you don't, here's a list of what YouTube recommends. That way you're not isolating the people that do know, and you're still providing the right information for the people that don't know. So it's important to think about that before you shoot your video and before you upload it to YouTube. Don't make any assumptions about your viewers. When you get to the point of actually exporting your video and uploading it to YouTube, it's important to use YouTube's recommended export settings, which we have available in the exercise files as a checklist for you as well. So let's take a look at what YouTube's recommended settings are. For the file type, they recommend a .mp4. And if some of these settings seem a little technical to you, that's okay, because once you start using your video editing program and you go to export your video, you'll see where these settings will be available. And it will become a little more intuitive once you actually see that screen. It might sound a little technical right now, but you'll get used to it as you become more experienced in using YouTube and just publishing videos in general. The recommended audio codec is AAC-LC. YouTube's recommended video codec is H.264. And YouTube has a number of recommended resolutions as well. So the resolution of your video is really the quality of your video that you upload to YouTube. I wouldn't recommend uploading anything below 720p. 720p is considered an HD video, as well as 1080p and above. With the internet speeds that we have nowadays, it doesn't take very long to upload a 720p video, and the quality is just going to be much, much better. When you upload an HD video, YouTube will create compressed versions of that video as well. So for instance, if I upload a 1080p video, the maximum quality available to the viewer will be 1080p. But if they have a very slow internet connection, a 480p and a 360p version will also be available to them. However, if you upload a 360p video, videos of higher quality will not be available to that user. So YouTube will scale it down, but it won't scale it up. So like I said, I recommend 720p or above, and then you can see based on the quality video that you're going to upload to YouTube, what YouTube's recommended resolutions in pixels are for you. So if you're going to upload a 720p video, YouTube recommends using a canvas size of 1280 pixels by 720 pixels. And again, all of this information is available to you in the exercise files for this course. The last thing I want to mention is that as you become more experienced in editing videos and uploading to YouTube, try and become an amateur video editor. I think that will happen naturally for a lot of you. The first video that you edit might be a little bit of a challenge, but the 100th video that you edit is probably going to come pretty naturally, and you're going to be a lot more experienced in editing your videos. If you don't know how to do something in the video editor that you're using, go ahead and do a Google search for the answer. Who knows? You might even find somebody on YouTube that gives you the answer. So again, don't feel overwhelmed at first. There is a bit of a learning curve, but the more you edit, the better you'll get, and the higher quality videos you'll be able to upload to YouTube.